Solve this equation, and I'll marry you." Professor laughed, then froze when the janitor solved it. The laughter echoed through the lecture hall like a careless slap, sharp and humiliating, cutting deeper than anyone noticed. What began as a joke meant to entertain a room full of confident minds became the moment everything changed. No one saw it coming. Not the professor standing smugly at the board. Not the students certain they already knew how the world worked. And certainly not the janitor quietly standing near the back, holding a mop, carrying a lifetime of silence. But in that single moment, when arrogance met truth, the world tilted, and never quite returned to its old shape. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of underestimated people, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because they remind us who we are meant to be. The university was old, built of stone that remembered centuries of ambition, failure, and dreams whispered into its halls. Every morning, before students arrived with backpacks full of expectations and fear, the janitor walked those corridors alone. His name was Elias, though almost no one used it. To most, he was just the janitor. A man in faded blue coveralls, with tired eyes and hands roughened by years of work that left no trace of applause behind. He cleaned chalk dust from boards that carried brilliant equations, erased ideas that would shape futures, and emptied bins overflowing with discarded drafts of genius. Elias had not always been invisible. Once, decades earlier, he had been a student himself. Brilliant, curious, endlessly patient with numbers that seemed to speak to him more clearly than people ever had. But life had interrupted his education with brutal efficiency. A sick mother, mounting bills, a family that needed him more than abstract dreams ever could. He left the university quietly, promising himself he would return someday. Someday stretched into years, and years hardened into routine. He married, lost his wife too young, raised a daughter who moved far away, and eventually found himself back in the same university, not as a student, but as the man who cleaned up after them. Despite everything, Elias never stopped learning. At night, after long shifts, he sat in his small apartment with borrowed textbooks and notebooks filled edge to edge with equations. He listened to recorded lectures on an old radio. Mathematics was not a subject to him, it was a language that never lied, a world where effort mattered more than status. Numbers did not care who you were. They only cared whether you understood them. Professor Harold Whitman was everything Elias was not. Celebrated, confident, decorated with awards and invitations to speak at conferences around the world. His lectures were famous for their theatrical flair, his intelligence unquestioned, his ego quietly but firmly established. Students admired him, feared him, and competed for his approval. To Whitman, the classroom was a stage, and he was its star. On that particular afternoon, the lecture hall was full. The topic was advanced theoretical mathematics, the kind that made even gifted students sweat. Whitman moved confidently across the room, chalk in hand, deriving an equation so complex it seemed almost cruel. The symbols stretched across the board like a challenge thrown directly at the room. He paused, turned, and surveyed the students with a satisfied smile. He made a remark meant to amuse, a joke about how difficult the problem was, how solving it would require brilliance beyond the ordinary. Then came the comment that would change everything. With careless humor, Whitman added that anyone who could solve the equation deserved a reward so absurd it was clearly meant as mockery. He laughed, the students laughed, and the laughter rolled through the hall without resistance. Except it stopped. At the back of the room, Elias had paused mid-sweep. His eyes were fixed on the board, not out of curiosity but recognition. The equation was not new to him. He had wrestled with it years ago, late at night, scribbling solutions under a dim lamp. He saw immediately where the professor had taken a wrong turn, a subtle assumption that collapsed under closer scrutiny. His heart began to pound, not with excitement, but with something closer to fear. He knew the answer. But knowing and speaking were two very different things. Elias hesitated. He was used to being unseen, unheard. He knew what happened when people like him stepped out of their assigned roles. He had experienced dismissal, ridicule, and the quiet cruelty of disbelief. Yet something inside him stirred, a sense of responsibility to the truth, to the beauty of the solution waiting to be completed. Slowly, almost against his will, he stepped forward. The room shifted. Students turned, surprised to see the janitor moving toward the front. The laughter faded into confused murmurs. Whitman noticed him then, irritation flickering across his face. This was not part of the performance. This was disruption. Elias picked up a piece of chalk with trembling fingers. His hands, so steady when cleaning, shook now under the weight of attention. He began to write, carefully, methodically, each line following the last with quiet confidence. The room fell into an uneasy silence. The scratching of chalk against the board sounded impossibly loud. What unfolded over the next few minutes felt unreal. Elias corrected the assumption, restructured the approach, and led the equation toward an elegant solution that resolved every contradiction. There was no flourish, no attempt to impress. Just clarity. Just truth. Whitman's smile vanished. His confident posture stiffened. As the final line appeared on the board, recognition dawned in his eyes, not just of correctness but of being wrong. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Students stared, some in awe, others in disbelief. The janitor had done what none of them could. For Elias, the moment was terrifying. He expected ridicule, dismissal, perhaps even anger. Instead, there was silence. Then something even more unsettling, respect. Whitman approached the board slowly, his earlier arrogance replaced by something like shock. He examined the solution, searching desperately for an error. There was none. The equation stood complete, undeniable. That day became legend within the university. Not because of the joke that had sparked it, but because of the humility it demanded. Whitman, forced to confront his own assumptions, did something few in his position ever do. He acknowledged the brilliance before him. He learned Elias's name. The days that followed were uncomfortable and transformative. Elias was invited to sit in on lectures, not as a curiosity, but as a contributor. Faculty members approached him with questions. Students sought his guidance. Slowly, painfully, the identity he had buried for decades resurfaced. He was not just a janitor. He was a mathematician. Whitman, for his part, changed as well. The man who had once hidden behind humor and superiority began to listen. He learned Elias's story, the sacrifices that had stolen his academic future. Guilt mingled with admiration, and something deeper took root, respect born of equality. The promise that had been made in jest now hovered between them, heavy with meaning. It was never about marriage, not in the literal sense. It was about commitment, about honoring truth over ego, humility over pride. Whitman offered Elias a formal position at the university, helping him complete the degree he had been forced to abandon. Elias accepted, not for recognition, but for closure. Years passed. Elias completed his studies, published papers that reshaped certain corners of the field, and became a quiet mentor to students who felt out of place. Whitman retired eventually, leaving behind a legacy forever altered by one humbling afternoon. The two remained connected, bound by a shared moment that stripped away illusion and replaced it with understanding. Before we reach the end, take a moment to comment below and share what this story makes you feel. Your words matter, and someone else reading them might find the courage they need. On the day Elias received his doctorate, the lecture hall was full once again. The same stone walls, the same boards, but a very different atmosphere. Elias stood at the front, older, steadier, his hands no longer trembling. He looked out at the students, many of whom reminded him of himself, uncertain, hopeful, afraid of being unseen. He spoke not of equations, but of perseverance. Of how brilliance can exist anywhere. Of how dignity is not granted by titles, but by courage. As the applause filled the room, Elias felt something he had not felt in decades, wholeness. The janitor had never disappeared. He had simply been waiting. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to look twice at the people the world overlooks, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive, reaching those who need them most. Sometimes, all it takes to change a life is the courage to see someone clearly.